What's up, nerds? Welcome back. Do you like my choker? Don't worry, I know you do. Hey, you remember my last video where I talked about an independent book called Miss Meow? Yeah, and I promised there'd be a follow-up for this one, Deathrage, #1. Alright, so like I said last time, I put out a video talking about the companion piece that I got from this campaign, which was Miss Meow 1 and 2, and I also got Deathrage 1 and 2, and both of them are just such fun stories. So I mean, let's just kind of dive directly into what we have with this particular story. Because if you remember, this is the character we saw in Miss Meow. He was at the gala or whatever, and he's a very wacky kind of character. Like he sways wildly between murderous and just like comedic. So let's kind of get into it because we do still have that same thing here, but we also find out how he came to be specifically and who he is. So we're starting out here in Vegas in 1985, and we can see this is our character, our titular character. This is before he has the mask or whatever. So we see that he's here assaulting this businessman or whatever, and then he's telling them, well, another guy comes up and tries to like subdue him. He's like, don't you know who we are and everything, or you don't know who you're messing with? And then he like slams the dude on the ground. He's like, you can't do this or whatever. He's like, we're protected. He's like, this is where the other guy, Teddy, as it says his name is there, he comes up. He's like, protected? You haven't paid for your protection. So this guy, he picks him up and he goes and puts him up against like the window and everything, right? Which is obviously pretty threatening. When you're up in a high rise, up against a window, that's not really the best place to be. So anyway, he's saying the Spartans will love to hear you're dressing up your thugs to look like him, or to look like them, to which he says, I am a Spartan. So Teddy says, you can't tell them anything from where you're going. And then he just looks right back at him, and then he proceeds to throw him, or both of them, out of the window. Like, he takes him with him and shit. And he's even saying, like, you'll kill both of us. And then we see where they splash into this fountain or whatever. And we see, actually, he's the only one that died. So he's getting always like, yeah, wrong again. So he leaves from that encounter, and then we go back up into the office building with this other girl. Her name, as you can see from the cover, her name is Candy. So she's coming up to this other guy and is like, oh, we got another one over here, Teddy. So he says, wait, don't hurt me or whatever. He reaches into a desk and pulls out an envelope that apparently had the protection money. So Teddy is just like, well, now, was that so hard? Or what did he say? Without that wasn't so bad, was it? And then we see where they're walking. And I guess for them, you know, it wasn't that bad. It's probably bad for whoever the cleaning crew is that has to come and pick all this shit up. But anyway, we go from there back over to the Spartan laboratory where it says, he's one of ours. I don't understand how this could happen because, as we can see, they're finding out about what's going on with this rogue Spartan or whatever. So he goes over to one of his subordinates, says, you know, I want you to pull up the file for Mark Freeman right now. So he goes over and does that, and we can see when he does that, there's this concerned female scientist who just kind of slinks out the back door or whatever. So she leaves from there, and then... like I said, I still love these like fake ads or whatever, like this one for Deathrage where he's talking about rhythm, male enhancement. So anyway, we go over to, what is this, 84? Yeah, Greece of 1984. And this is where Mark is first entering into the Spartan program or whatever. He shows up, and as you can see, he's a soldier. You know, as you can tell from the like the dress or whatever they call it is. Yeah, I don't really know what they call it. I know there's a specific form or like word for it. It's like formal dress or some shit like that. Anyway, so he's coming in and he's telling him, Dakota is telling Mark about their organization and how it has a long history. And basically it kind of reminded me of like the Knights Templar from the Assassin's Creed franchise, where basically like they've always existed ever since like the fall of like Sparta. They've still existed kind of like in secret, and they were always just kind of like they had their hand in world events. Well, starting from like the death of Alexander the Great, because it says, when Alexander the Great took Persia, we could no longer stay in the shadows. His assassination marks the birth of the Spartan world order. So that's where Mark is looking. He looks up at a statue of Leonidas. He's like, so then it's not all just a conspiracy. And he's saying, you know, basically as far as like everybody else is concerned, yeah, it is just a myth. But here, no, it's not. But anyway, we keep going to where they're going to go ahead and do what they have to do to make him a Spartan, which involves this, I'm assuming, painful process. But he goes into this little lab and they introduce Mark to Marla, who is that scientist that we saw earlier who was kind of slinking out of the room. So he brings Mark in here and she says, he'll do. Have you brought him up to speed? And Mark says, yes, ma'am. I'll get the experimental enhancements and will be contracted as Teddy's personal bodyguard for 10 years. But Dakota tells him, but you will be a Spartan first and foremost. So that's where she tells, or what's her name? Marla tells him, like, aren't we all? And then he says, let's go get you prepped. So she also starts working on this, and we can see where she's like going through all of the stuff, and she sees one that's called loyalty chip, because that's something that they do have implanted in them. She's like, oh, these bastards. So she ends up putting a call in to Teddy because she's actually incommunicado with him. So she's telling him about like the whole loyalty chip thing and everything. She says, I've never seen this type of code before. But he tells her, your time has come, my dear. Deactivate the device. So she's like, yes, sir, I'll try. He's like, I don't pay you to try. So she goes in the dead of night and tries to like mess with the code or whatever to make it not work or make it inoperable. So she's like, okay, I can do this. Then it says code impaired. So that brings us to the next morning where they start doing this like work on him and everything. And one of the ingredients that they apparently need is this water from the Fountain of Youth. And Mark even kind of asks like, why did you need that or whatever? And they say that Teddy has control of the Fountain of Youth. He says he only allows access to its waters if he will profit from it. You're the first in the next generation of Spartan soldiers. With our elixir and these waters, you'll be more powerful than Leonidas. So that's when the boss comes in and says, now don't go giving the kid ideas of grandeur. This is a brave thing you're doing, son. Are you ready to be a Spartan? And he just says, like, yeah, more than anything. I'll make you proud. So they come in, they bring the chip in and everything, and then we see this thing where they literally like cut off his whole cranium cap and shit so that they can start working on him. And when they do that, that's when they have to start infusing him with like the waters and everything to make sure he stays alive. So as soon as that hits his like veins, I guess, it causes him to do this thing where he like gasps and then his eyes open and they're glowing and shit. So kind of meant to show us like, yes, it's starting to take effect and everything. So now we're coming up on 6 months later, which brings us back to the current situation where they're trying to figure out, okay, what the hell's going on with him? So this is where Dakota tells the boss, basically what happened is someone tried to come in and mess with the code, but they didn't actually know what they were doing because the code apparently is written in ancient Greek. So he's saying like, he has an idea of who it was, and they only had a rudimentary knowledge of ancient Greek. She didn't know enough to fully deactivate the chip, which they probably believe she did. What she did accomplish is far worse. The function has been reversed. Mark will subconsciously subvert any Spartan pursuit. He is the perfect anti-Spartan. So the boss gets all pissed off. He's like, we'll bring him in. We'll just replace it. But he says, it's too late, sir. The chip's biological adaptation will have completed by now. Removing the chip will kill him. So he says it's too late for Mark. But there's one way we can use this to our advantage. So we see this thing where, remember, he's supposed to be serving as a bodyguard for Teddy right now. So that's what he's doing. They call him up and he answers and they're saying, we have a new mission for you and everything. So he walks into the office where Teddy has his headquarters or whatever. He walks in and tells him, or Teddy says, was that Marla? She should have been here by now. But he says, it was Leonidas with a mission, sir. And he says, and what's your mission? He says, protect your life at all costs. Spartan prerogative. So Teddy's just kind of looking at him like, okay, because I mean, he's his bodyguard, so he kind of already expected that. But if you will remember, he's basically programmed to do the exact opposite of whatever orders they give him. So of course that means he's going to try and kill him. And Teddy even says, like, Mark, what are you doing? He says, protecting you, sir. So he comes running out and he's saying, like, damn it, where is Marla and all this shit? So Mark comes up and literally stabs him through like a brick wall and manages to impale him from behind. So that sends him kind of like stumbling forward. He goes crawling towards the fountain and shit. And he's trying to tell him like, Mark, stop. But he's like, don't worry, boss. You're safe with me. And he cuts off his damn head. So that's where he goes up and he takes the helmet from him. And that's where we can see like it starts doing this thing. Like if you remember from the Miss Meow video, where it's always just showing like different expressions and shit. So he walks away and says, you'll always be safe here, boss. And then he just walks away. So that's where we leave off on this, but not before I do show you some more amazing Jamie Tyndall art. So like I said, this was part of like a package deal. So yes, I do have the second issue. So let's kind of pick up where we left off from there, sort of, because we see this thing where he's basically like performing at a casino thing or whatever that's kind of circus themed, and he's just juggling two swords and a damn chainsaw, which, I mean, hey, pretty fucking impressive no matter what. So he's doing that just for, for the fun of it. And then we see this thing where, like, this cocktail waitress comes by. She kind of, like, I guess whistles at him or whatever. So that gives him the heart eyes again. He says, hey, you want to juggle? Oops. Because he throws one of the swords into, like, the horse on the carousel. So he says, oops, no one saw that. In you go. And he takes it out and he throws his weapons back in a bag and goes to this, like, telephone booth and shit. So he goes in there and he's trying to get in contact with someone. He just says, okay, Deep. It says Deep breathes. There was no need for that second E in the word breaths. But anyway, so he says that and it says, you can do this. Don't take no for an answer. He has to speak to me sometime. So he tries calling and just number disconnected. So he like gets pissed off. He breaks the phone and then he really breaks the phone. And then all of a sudden we have this. And yes, I know, I thought of Cortana too. So she says, greetings, Mark. My name is Pixel. And he's like, what the? She says, spike in heart rate detected. Please remain calm, because she can monitor his like vitals and shit. So he's asking, what the hell are you? And she says, my name is Pixel. I'm here to assist you. He's like, oh, I see. You work for the boss, huh? She says, I am the boss, Mark. You must go back home now. Or something like that. What? You must go back to the warehouse now. He's like, no, I have to get back to Greece. I fucked up, but they have to help me. And she says, you must go to the warehouse to get back to your Spartans. Remember, I'm here to assist you now, and you must keep the boss safe. So he's just like, okay, you got it, boss. And he has this like evil smile and shit. And then we can see this thing where there's kind of like a close-up on the paper talking about how a Vegas mob organization loses its head. So they're talking about Teddy because there's even a picture of a teddy bear right there. So we go from there to this where we see, if you will remember, Teddy got his head cut off. And so Marla has shown up and she's also summoned Candy and shit. And Candy's basically telling her, like, what do you think this is? Or what do you think I am? You can't just summon me. But she tells her, like, well, apparently I can. Good girl. So Candy tells her, poor Teddy, cut down by his own goon. I told him them Spartans were no good partners. And she's like, pff. Or Marla's like, pff. Too bad he doesn't listen to pets. So she says, you mean didn't? She's like, never you mind that. So Marla tells her, the first wave is ready. Take them to the strip and get back that mask. So she's like, yes, ma'am. And then Marla goes downstairs where she's like, sorry, I'm late. Because if you remember, Teddy's head fell in the Fountain of Youth, which, as we saw with Mark when he was being transformed into a Spartan, keeps people alive. So it kept his head alive. And now I guess she has him in like one of these Futurama head tanks full of that water. So we go back over to Deathrage, where he's coming out of like the casino and shit. He's kind of like singing to himself, and then all of a sudden he's literally attacked by an animatronic bear and shit. So he does manage to fend that off or whatever. And then we see this thing where there's also this like fire juggler, but she's not just a performer. As you could tell from the cover, she's going to become somewhat significant. So anyway, he takes out that one bear, and then a whole bunch of other bears start showing up to start fighting with him, and they all got weapons and shit. So he starts fighting with them. Like I said, even though this is kind of goofy, like fighting with animatronic bears, it's still pretty cool because they look pretty damn vicious and they all have weapons, like I said. So this is where we see Candy shows up and she says, you took my teddy bear. I'm taking it back, shithead. And he's like, what teddy bear? As he turns the mask back into Teddy's face and shit. So I was like, you ass. That was perfect. So anyway, Pixel tells him 12 o'clock. And he turns around, he's like, huh? And we see this army of bears start coming for him. So they manage to subdue him, and they're starting to, like, take the helmet off and shit. But before they can, that's where she comes up. I think her name is Firekiss. Yeah, it's right here on the cover in front of me. Anyway, so Firekiss comes up, and she starts using her power against it. And she even says, like, forget to pay your cub support. So he also starts, like, fighting back. As we can see, he, like, shoots one of the head, or two of them. And then we see where they just kind of start fighting together. So she says, you gonna help or what? Get up. So Candy comes up, kicks Firekiss and says, like, mind your business, strawberry shortcake and shit. So she kind of fights with Deathrage for a second, but he does manage to, like, I guess get away from her, you could say. Because, as we can see, she has the upper hand. But then all of a sudden, Firekiss comes up and we can see the reflection in his helmet. She comes up and then she immediately, like, burns him and shit. So, or she burns Candy or whatever. And then Candy, while she's on fire, goes and jumps in the pool. And Mark tells her, that was awesome. How did you do that? She's like, not now. Come on, let's get you out of here. And then he asks her, where are we going? She says, follow me. I've got a spot. And I saw this and I was like, that's funny. You remember those Old Spice commercials with, I can't remember the guy's name. But I mean, basically, this is the parody of that. So we go from there to where she's taking him to this like motel or whatever, and he's even asking her, "Did you help me back there just to kill me on a seedy snuff film set? It didn't turn out too well for James Woods and Debbie Harry in that one movie. Did you see that?" And if you don't know what he's talking about the movie Videodrome, which I mean was like a box office failure, but it's become a cult classic because it's a Cronenberg picture. So a lot of people, if you know the name of David Cronenberg, you know exactly what type of thing I'm talking about. So yeah. Anyway, she says, "You think it's bad now? You should have seen this place when the mob owned this block." She says, "You couldn't go a week without someone finding some poor sap full of bullets rotting away in one of these rooms. Come on in." So Pixel's telling him, like, "Don't worry, I don't detect any imminent danger. You can follow her in and shit." So they come in. She says, "The word on the street is the last big boss left in Vegas lost his head." He's like, "Uh-huh." She says, "His teddy bear head. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" And he just kind of stands there with like the zipper mouth and shit. And so she like goes on and says, "Mm-hmm. See, I recognized your girl back there." He says she used to be a friend, and then he sees this like crib, so he's like, "You got a baby?" But she doesn't answer the question. She just says, "And I think I'd recognize you too if you took off that mask." So he's just kind of standing there like, "Oh shit." She like summons her fire powers and then tells him like, "Tell me everything that you know, and I might not flame this entire motel down with you inside, Spartan." He says, or Pixel tells him, "I believe you should cooperate." So he gives her the whole explanation, but we do kind of skip over it and everything. And then she says, "I just don't get it. You worked for Teddy and liked the gig." He's like, "Yeah." She says, "And your Spartan overlord told you to keep him safe." He says, "Yep, uh-huh." She says, "Then you cut off his head?" He's like, "He's safe here with me," as he's looking all psychotic and shit. So she's like, "Okay, I need to look at this." But Pixel like freaks out and tells her like, "Stay away." And he immediately says, "Stay away from her," or what? "Leave her alone." She's like, "Her?" So he says, "Look, I just need to get back into the factory." She says, "Why would you want to go back there?" He says, "They did something to my head before the mask. I was a good man. I have to know what they did for Leo to let me back in." So she's like, "All right, we'll need to get you out of those clothes." He says, "Wait, you're going to help me?" As he has this like derp face and shit. And then she says, "Only if you agree to let me dress you. I made my suit, you know." So he's like, "Sure. I lost my shirt somewhere anyway." So she asks him, "What gear have you got?" "Throw it all there on the bed." And then we see where he literally throws all the shit he has on. And there's just like some random ephemera in here. Like, I don't know if you can see it. There are 3D glasses, a Viewmaster, there's a He-Man figure, a Millennium Falcon, an Etch-a-Sketch. Is that Indiana Jones's hat? Let's see, a squirt flower, some floppy disks for whatever reason, a troll doll, a cassette player, and the headphones. And then, of course, like a whole shit ton of weapons and crap. And then I think there's like a book in here too, like a clown tie for whatever reason. But anyway, she says, "Oh man, you're going to need a lot of pockets." Paging Dr. Liefeld. So he says, "Oh, there's my shirt," because that's another thing that was in there. His shirt was in there, so he goes to put that on. But that's where we leave off for right now, and we'll see what ends up happening. Like I mentioned in my last video, Miss Meow number 3 is currently funding, and it should be here soon enough, I'd imagine. But yeah, we'll see what comes from this. I really enjoy these stories. Like, they're really good. Just for two floppies, like these were I don't want to say they were just easy reads because they were entertaining reads. That's what makes it easier and better to read these books, when it's actually entertaining, when it has action in it, when it has like a good story, and like I've mentioned before, just enough humor to kind of like not make it dead serious. You know, not that I have a problem with dead serious, but when you have a character like this, who he's kind of like goofy and he tends to act a little bit like weird sometimes, I need just the right balance of humor to not make him to where I can't take him seriously as a threat. You know what I mean? There has to be just enough humor. Like with Deadpool, there has to be just enough humor to where you're like, okay, this guy is funny, but I should still take him seriously as a threat because he could kill me. That's what I need from it. And they actually do tread that line perfectly here with him. So totally fine with it. But once again, I do not know if anybody out there happened to back this. If you did, I would love to know your thoughts on this one too, just as with Miss Meow. Like, these books are just so good, and I hope it continues to go on for a very long time with consistency, because this is the type of stuff I've been wanting. I mean, one of the only kind of pitfalls that you really get from the independent market is that the books aren't always as consistent. You know, one book you might back it and get it within, you know, a couple months. Another one might take you over a year before you get it. It just kind of depends. And then also on top of that, there's just you never really know with independent creators, you know? One day they might want to tell a superhero story, but for the next, 6 months, they're only worried about telling, true crime or something like that. Like, there's not enough consistency to keep them going. And I understand if they don't want to have like somebody else just like telling their characters stories, they want to do it all themselves. That's fine, but it also kind of makes it harder on us who just want, an ongoing character and this, keep continuing a story when they're constantly like switching lanes to go into different properties. It's just at some point we need someone to like stick to a series and just stick to it for years. Like that's the only thing they write. You know what I mean? But I mean, we'll see what ends up happening going forward. For right now, I can definitely say I'm happy with what I have gotten here, and I hope to see a lot more of it. But I mean, yeah, we'll see what happens going forward. So again, feel free to let me know what you thought about this book from my reading, or if you've read it, definitely let me know what you've thought as well. But I think that's going to do it for me on this review. So if you enjoyed this video, then definitely make sure you like the video. Make sure you are subscribed. If you would like, go ahead and share out the video. You know I appreciate it. But if you're done here, then go and read a book, especially these. And well, if not, then I'll see you on my next video.